Today we're talking about sampling populations, the target population we wish to reach or to generalize about, and the sampling frame we use to create that sample. We'll look at the major steps in defining a population and defining and refining the sampling frame from which we'll actually draw the sample. Some technical terms. We draw a sample of elements from a target population. For example, the National Crime Victimization Survey, elements are people, and the target population is the non-institutionalized population of the U.S. age 12 and over. If it's a telephone survey of registered voters, then the target population are registered voters within a state or within the country. But target populations don't have to be people, and elements don't have to be people. For example, each year petitions of certiorari are filed with the U.S. Supreme Court seeking review of lower court decisions, usually the ones that the appellate lost. The court grants only a small portion of these petitions, and there are thousands of certiorari requests each year. So while it's of great interest to judicial scholars to understand what aspects of a cert petition affects its chances of being granted, a detailed reading of every one of the thousands of petitions filed each year is impractical. What's more, since only a very small percentage are actually granted, you want to be able to focus your efforts on those that are granted and compare them with a manageable sample of cert petitions that were denied, rather than spending the vast majority of your time only on the ones that were denied. So this calls out for a sampling method to approach the population of cert petitions rather than an exhaustive census of the entire set. So in this case, our target population consists of all the cert petitions filed in a given year, and the elements are simply the individual petitions. Surveys have to be very explicit about the target population. They must specify precisely what the population is about which you wish to generalize. That target population is the group of elements for which the investigator wishes to make an inference using sample statistics. The sample statistics are simply the things you calculate from your sample. It might be the mean or the average for some value, or it could be the percentage in a particular category, for example, the percentage unemployed. But that percentage or that mean, the sample statistics, are used to make inferences about the entire population, not just to describe the nature of the sample. It's this ability of a sample and sample statistics to reach inferences and conclusions about entire populations, which is the statistical power of sampling and sample surveys. Now, what do we think about populations? First of all, a population is, at least in principle, finite in size. It's not an infinitely large collection, and in principle, at least, we could create a complete list of the population, even though in practice that's often impossible. The population is also bounded over time. Even a simple concept like the population of the United States changes on a second-by-second basis as people are born, people die, people move into the country, people move out of the country. And so we have to specify what period of time we're talking about for the population. In the cert petitions, that could be a particular year. In the case of the country, it could be a week, a month, possibly as long as a year, depending on how sensitive our population is to change over time. In the U.S., population changes continuously, but not that much from month to month, though year-to-year changes might not be trivial. Finally, a population must be observable. It does us no good to select a sample and then find that we can't observe the population. And so this is another element, that we must be able to observe that population once we've drawn the sample. Let me give you an example of what seems like a simple population, but some of the questions that arise from that. Let's imagine we wanted to study UW students, and so we were going to define our population as all students currently registered for classes at the University of Wisconsin. Notice who this does not include. That is, spring and fall semester students who are not registered for the current 3-week session. Now this is an example that could be altered depending on your goals. We might very well define the population to include anyone who registered for classes in either the fall or the spring or the summer semesters during academic year 2009 and 2010. That would be a precise definition of the population, but it would obviously include more people, those who register spring or fall but not for summer, and it would be unrepresentative of summer students, though it might be more representative of UW students as a whole. But if we were interested in summer school, why people take summer classes, then we might very well prefer to make the population be defined as simply those students who register for any of the various summer sessions. Whether it makes sense to include fall and spring or only summer really depends on what our goals in the study are. If we want a broad picture of UW students, then it would make sense to include students who register at any time during an academic year. On the other hand, if we want to know why people take summer classes, we would want to restrict the sample to those in the summer class. Sampling statisticians tend to be obsessive about the detail required in defining a target population, so that there's no uncertainty and there's no discretion in deciding what or who is included or excluded from a population. For example, in Grove's book, page 70, I have to quote more or less the definition of adults 18 or over who reside in housing units in the U.S. What is a household? All persons occupying a housing unit. What is a housing unit? A house, apartment, mobile home, group of rooms, or a single room that's occupied as separate living quarters. What are separate living quarters? Rooms in which all occupants live and eat separately from any other persons in the building and which have direct access to the outside. Who are occupants? Occupants may be a single family, one person alone, 2 or more families living together, or any other group of related or unrelated persons who share living arrangements. And not all adults live in housing units. Prisons, long-term medical care facilities, military barracks, and college dormitories do not constitute housing units by this definition. Those are part of the institutionalized population, which is usually omitted from national surveys.